want to welcome you, Paul. Thank you for joining us today on Let's Talk Leadership, a new series from FuturaFemina where we talk about leadership and everything it's involved. And I'm glad that you can be our guest today.
Yeah, great to be here.
Yeah, we have quite a history together in the workplace, as well as in, let's say, our current business. Perhaps you can tell the viewers what you do in day-to-day.
Oh yeah, absolutely. A little bit of history of me, but also my current occupation. My expertise is high performance, which means how to achieve big business goals with the least amount of effort. That's high performance. And I do a couple of things in my area of expertise. I'm a professional speaker, so I speak about a subject, but I also am a trusted advisor, boardroom consultant. So it's not only the speaking part, but also helping organizations to implement the ideas in their organization. So these things combined is the broad spectrum of what I do right now. And speaking of history, we have a history together because I was originally trained as a chemical engineer. That's my background. And the first 10 years of my career, I spent doing what engineers love to do, which is solving problems which do not talk back. And after about 10 years, I realized, well, there's something else as well. It's got something to do with humans and relationships. So I got very interested in that subject as well. So I moved and I was working with a corporation, at DSM at that time. And that's also where we have a common background. That's where we met. And I did strategy work in the last couple of years at DSM. I was building a high performance organization. In the global community, which is a fascinating subject because this is about how you make successful people even more successful.
Yeah, and that's really, what also always has fascinated me, how I say always what makes people tick. So really, I'm very curious always about my complete surroundings, how everything works. And humans are the most interesting subject. So that's a common interest we have.
Yeah.
Indeed, that came about already when we were working in DSM together. And then later on, we evolved in the careers indeed in that path of really understanding what those dynamics are about and supporting others to bring their best about.
Right.
And to me, that has also to do with leadership. Really getting that core of you out in the best form it can be. How do you see leadership?
There are many definitions of leadership. The one I like is leadership is the ability to get the most out of people. So leadership is the ability to get the most out of people. In other words, to create a success environment for others to bring their best. And what I see that successful people do, they realize no big goal can be achieved in isolation. So they have to lead others. And that's about bringing the best of others out in the open and to the organization and to achieve the results. So that's for me, that's leadership.
Mm-hmm. And what do you feel is necessary to bring that about?
Of course, there are several components of making that happen. I think two important ones. First of all, you need to have a vision. In other words, you need to have a vision. This is what I want to achieve. A point at the horizon over there. This is where I want to go. And the second thing is you need to make a connection with other people, because no single vision has been achieved in isolation. And the funny thing is, if you look at leaders and they are somewhat weak in one of the two areas, you see very interesting behavior. If people are strong in vision but weak in connection, usually it's the ivory tower. And people try to do it themselves. It's lone wolf leadership, right? Mm-hmm. But if people are very strong in connection but weak in vision, what you tend to do is we call this a campfire organization. Kumbaya, singing Kumbaya. I was a Boy Scout in the past, and when we were having a scouting camp and we were sitting around the campfire, holding hands, singing Kumbaya. So big friends, but the thing is that friendship is important, relationship is important, but you need to have a vision. This is where I want to go. So these are the two components: vision and connection.
Mm-hmm. True. Yet I also believe I totally support the connection part. It's also part of my definition of feminine leadership. To be able to connect is that softer part of the skills which everybody basically has. The question is always how you translate them in the day to day. And to me, every day in every action you have, you can be a leader in. So you can show what you're all about yourself. And by showing, for instance, by example, what you can do by having a vision, but for yourself, but also for your environment, that's how you, for instance, also make that connection. And through enthusiasm and everything, you bring others together to strive for that common goal. Yeah, I see you nodding.
Absolutely, I think this is a great observation. How to put leadership in practice, and I think these are a couple of great points where successful leaders make a difference. Also being a role model, also to others, an authentic role model to others. Yes.
Yeah, it's great that you mentioned authenticity, because to me that's also one of the parts why I also chose to go this path for FuturaFemina, because in the past there was a part of me which could not dig into everything I was, that complete authenticity to really stand for everything you are. And I think that is great if you can bring that across, because then you bring the best energy to whatever you do, if that's the workplace, but also in your personal life, because in your personal life, you have also many situations, where you can lead, where you really can be true to yourself and use that authenticity to make steps in whatever cause you're pursuing.
Absolutely. You make a good point. The thing is, if you show authentic leadership behavior, it makes people comfortable also to show authenticity themselves, bring their best to the situation, and so it's a mutual help. If you want to make that connection, that's absolutely true.
Yeah, indeed. The authenticity and connection bring together a few parts where. Let's say in the old days, it was not that common to show your vulnerability, to show big emotions. And I think really that makes you whole as a human. And it's really nice that I see now, both in the work environment, but also privately, there is that openness to be that whole person and to really dig into yourself and bring to the table what you have. Do you see that also for yourself? If you look at your own leadership style, that authenticity and that connection.
It's interesting because when you grow older, you develop also your leadership style as well. And I see a couple of things. And the first thing, and that's the point you're making about emotion. Alan Weiss, one of the people I have learned a lot from, says logic makes people think, emotion makes people act. So it is the emotion which drives decision, which drives action. And if you ignore that, then it's very difficult to get action. So being in touch with the emotion, I think is very important. So that's what I had to learn as well, because again, as an engineer, you're not trained to work with emotion, you're trained to work with logic, right? So I think that's one point. The second thing which I have found when it comes to behaviors is that oftentimes, if you want to become more successful as a leader, it's not so much about learning different behaviors, but it's about getting rid of behaviors which are not helpful. And I call this kryptonite behaviors. And it's based after Superman. If you know the Superman movies, he could face everything except for kryptonite. And that was the substance which would drain all his power. Now, when I work with executives and leaders, what I often see, they are very capable, but they have one or two kryptonite behaviors which drain all the energy. For example, what I often see is yes, but, right? Yes, but, whenever there's an idea, yes, but, immediately pushback. Another kryptonite behavior I often see is adding too much value. In other words, you come to a leader with a great idea, and the leader thinks, oh, I'm a leader, I must I must say something useful about this, because otherwise I will not be a leader. I'm paid to say something useful. So instead of supporting the idea, you add too much value, changing something which is irrelevant, and all of a sudden the commitment of people to the idea decreases. And so that's also a leadership behavior which I often see with executives. So when I talk about executives, how to best get better, it's often not about building behaviors, it's about getting rid of unhelpful behaviors, kryptonite behaviors.
Yeah, true. And often there are also, to my experience, and looking at the examples where I've learned a lot from, there are program behaviors often. Often that extra adding value, as you mentioned it, it's sometimes triggered, for instance, by insecurity. That, you have to say something because otherwise you will not be valued. Or, there's also some patterns that you are not visible enough. So people then talk really a lot.
Absolutely.
Compensate for that, or just do the opposite. They totally retract and do not say anything. And often these things come from the cultural setting where we have been brought up, both from our school system, how we should behave, female, male, boys, girls, how they grow up, and what's, let's say, the typical behaviors which get supported and others not. How do you see those things?
I can surely relate to what you're saying. What I see is that often the environment determines which type of behavior you show. And typically, the behavior that people show is behavior somehow they get a reward for this type of behavior. Otherwise, you wouldn't show them. I give an example. I used to work in an organization where the quality of excuses was more important than the quality of the results.
Oh my God.
Yeah, which is a fascinating concept. In other words, people spend an enormous amount of time, in the internal amount of time, coming up with the best excuses why this time they didn't make it, right? Mm-hmm. And instead of using this internal energy to the external world to grow your business, achieve the strategic goals, etc., etc., etc. And in the end, this was a very destructive part of the entire culture of that organization. Now, once they started to realize, wait a second, we are really rewarding people for the quality of their excuses, and they stopped doing that, all of a sudden, people were focused much more on results. So I think that's the environment, in the end, the success environment, which can either be a warning or an example, right? Yeah. And when you work with organizations, the trick is to recognize those triggers where you trigger certain behavior with people, and then shift from a warning to examples. Hey, what is it that we can do differently to become a role model, to become more creative, and take the next step?
Yeah. And also to recognize for yourself when you're in such a position, whether that's an environment which makes you blossom, or perhaps where is an environment which is not so compatible and it gets into all of those systems which drain your energy.
And I think you make a great point. What we need to realize is some coasts are made for shipwreck. Some coasts are made for shipwreck. In other words, you cannot be successful in certain environments. You can be the best in the world at what you do. However, if you operate in an environment where people simply do not recognize your value, recognize your work, you have two choices. You can either try to change the environment, good luck with that, or you can go to a place where people love their work. And what I teach people always is, once you are in an environment where you see that people are not valuing your contribution, quit and go to an environment where people do, because it makes you happy and you will be surrounded by people who love what you're doing.
Yeah, exactly. And that's also a reinforcing cycle, because if you're in an environment where you're really happy, then also your best comes out, which then enhances. And the opposite is also true on the other side. If you go and struggle and fight against all of those principles, which are really not yours, you're digging your own hole. You're getting into this cycle of never ending. You go
absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, you're not having fun, that's for sure.
You're not having fun, and can even turn into more severe things.
Absolutely.
Which can really harm yourself as well. And for you personally, Paul, because you talk about a few examples of people you work with, how does that trigger you? What is important to you?
Yeah, here's the thing. What is important to me, and also you get to know yourself once you start to work with other people. If you look at working with other people, what I've learned of myself is that I have a hierarchy of values and what is important for me and what is important for me. And if I look at hierarchy of value, one of the most important values for me is to contribute, the ability to contribute. I cannot be happy in an environment where I maintain the status quo. I get paid well, but I do not contribute. So what I have found is that contribution is very important. Another thing which is very important for me is freedom. Freedom to do whatever it takes. Freedom to do whatever it takes. And what I found is that freedom doesn't mean you have all the freedom to do whatever you want. That's not what freedom is all about. But freedom is there's a sandbox. There's a sandbox in which you're allowed to play, but within the sandbox you have all the freedom to make it happen. And once I understand this is the sandbox, these are the rules of the game, that makes me very happy. I help executives also to understand what is your sandbox and how do you communicate your sandbox to your people. One of the conversations I have whenever I consult or work with clients is how do we work together? So which behaviors will give us energy and which behaviors will not give us energy and drain our energy. And if you do this beforehand, then it's also very easy to have the conversation once you engage in that type of behavior to address this behavior. I saw you doing this. Let's go back to what we discussed earlier. Is this still a high performance relationship that we have right now? So I've learned a lot. Working with clients teaches me a lot about myself as well.
That is what happens.
Yeah, that's what happens. Yeah.
Typically, you get also a mirror by working in general with other people. Yeah. You get a mirror back about yourself too, and you attract also clients which are in a similar system as yourself, because that's a system you have learned how it works, and so you can teach again.
Absolutely.
And so this is an evolving thing. But I also love about what you're saying in the compatibility of behaviors, because it's very important to indeed know yourself, and from that look at what the other's behaviors are, and also to understand the other one. Because for instance, I also use leadership, but also behavioral assessments and all of that to understand not only your own behavior, but in a team setting, then also to understand where the others are coming from. Mm-hmm. So if you are a giver, but the other one is not a receiver, then you already have a struggle in getting that connection on that level really optimal. And as soon as you understand, awareness is really the start of everything. Once you create that awareness, you can understand where that behavior comes from, and we're all capable of addressing that within also certain boundaries, and then to adapt it and to get it to a higher level. And for me, it's always great to see if somebody I work with understands their own mechanism and their impact on their environment. And when you change that, it brings a shift in them, and they go to a much higher energy. They're much happier in their workplace. They get the feedback from their surroundings that they are also happier. It's
Absolutely.
a ripple effect.
Absolutely. I think this is a great point, and you describe working with clients how you become more effective. This is what I found also in these type of processes, that if you want to work on behavior, and that's often what leadership is all about, when people grow in an organization or corporate ladder, at a certain point in time, it's no longer about experience, no longer about competences or skills, it's purely behaviors, and that's the deciding factor whether or not people will advance in their career or get stuck. And it's simply behaviors. Mm-hmm. And what I have found is that changing behaviors in the end is hard, but the thing is that it's often only one or two behaviors. If people can adapt, not even change, but adapt, make sure that they don't do stupid stuff. The yes, but they're adding too much value, excuses, those kind of things. So if you start changing those behaviors in yourself, a couple of things, one or two, then all of a sudden you release an enormous amount of energy for yourself, but also for your organization and for your team. And this is how the best get better.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, very true. And yeah, when you talk about changing behavior, it's good that you mention it. It's not about changing to something which you're not. It's
No,
about
no.
adapting something within your own framework. Like the stand that you just described, within your own limits, with your own definition of your norms and your values and everything you're about. You sometimes by getting that mirror and from your coach or who you work with, you then understand what your impact is. And if you're interested to change that, then that can have a large impact. But I'm a very, very high advocate of really being true to yourself. But within
Yeah.
being true to yourself, you have all of these registers which you can tune a bit, a little bit more of this, a little bit less of that, and that can have a huge impact.
An enormous amount of impact, and I think we shouldn't make things too complicated. I mean, if I look at an executive who has the nasty habit of interrupting people, it's a nasty habit. It reduces energy. It doesn't bring the best out of other people. My advice to those executives is very simple: stop it.
Yeah.
Please stop it. Stop doing this. Become aware of it and stop it. And it's not more complicated than that. And there's nothing about authenticity. Yeah? People are not authentic in interrupting people. No. It's nasty behavior. Stop it. Yeah. And then it means that with your authenticity of all the other good stuff that you can have a much bigger impact.
Yeah, true. Yeah, the solution can sometimes be simple. And I also, with working with my clients, it always helps them if they understand where it comes from.
Yeah.
So if they feel the need to say something in this case, because interrupting somebody else is the need for yourself to say something, where does that come from? And if you understand that a bit better, it's perhaps also easier to just shut.
Absolutely. Whatever works. That's true. Yeah.
So sometimes also the why behind it is interesting to dig out, so that you can have a larger impact.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if we then look at what you see in the current situation is necessary, how do you feel leadership is impacting that?
The past few months was interesting because when the water recedes, you see who's swimming naked, right? In the environment of 6 months ago, 1 year ago, it was not difficult to be successful. And what I see is that many leaders confuse luck with skill. So they thought they were skilled, but in the end they were simply lucky, right? Now, what the past 6 months have shown is that the world is changing rapidly. And the question is how to become agile, how to adapt. First of all, the world is not predictable. Fortunately, it isn't, because that would make life boring.
The world is changing always.
Rapidly. And
we're now having a rapid change, yeah.
A rapid change. And often the question is, how can we deal with it? Now, what I found is that the most successful approach is to shift from being lucky to being skilled. To shift from being lucky to being skilled. And what it means is you focus on those things you can control. Yeah. So what is it I can control, and what will have an impact once I start controlling this? And the funny thing is that if you want to take control in the current situation, it's not about doing more stuff. It's about quitting, strategic quitting, getting rid of stuff. And I give you an example. A restaurant owner, and I see a lot of restaurants here in my environment. Some of them are struggling, but some of them are thriving. And if you look at restaurants which are thriving, what they realize is they have a couple of dishes. They are very good. They are excellent at those dishes. So they focus on doing these dishes very, very well. Yeah, and market themselves. This is what we do. And people love it, because regardless of what's happening, they love the dish. They go to those restaurants. So those are very successful. They quit everything else, everything which doesn't work, which is experimental, which, okay, get rid of it. Focus on the stuff that you do very well. Now, others, they try everything. Yeah, it's a shot of hail, right? And you see it's very difficult. They struggle. So strategic quitting means focus on the thing you're strong at and get rid of everything else. Get rid of everything else. Because what happens is three things. First of all, you become much more robust. Yeah, once you do not have any anchors with you, you can be much more agile. The second thing, it's often much easier to do. Getting rid of stuff is much easier than adding stuff. You know?
Okay.
So that's the second reason. And the third reason, it creates opportunities. And that's an interesting thing, because I'll give you another example. Early in my career, I was part of a team, I was leader of a team. We had a toxic individual in the team. Now, what's a toxic individual? An individual who's very useful, adds value, competence, skills, but kills team spirit, kills team's energy. So what do you do with that? What I have learned is that the best way of dealing with that is strategic quitting, getting rid of this individual out of the team. And the reason is, when things become tough, think in turbulent times, yeah, it's the toxic individual which first of all destroys the team spirit. Yeah. The second thing is, it requires a lot of attention to have this person on board, management and leadership attention, which you could focus on other things as well. And the third thing is very difficult. Every single day you have to deal with this individual. Yeah, so get rid of it and find someone maybe with the same skill set, but who is a team player. So that's what strategic quitting is all about. So in general, what I see, and that's the big move right now, is your ability to quit equals your ability to massively succeed. And that's a very interesting observation and very funny if you think about it.
Yeah. I totally recognize the example you give. So it totally resonates with another example I have in my mind.
Yeah.
But looking at the time, Paul, I'm coming to what is my typical last question. And that would be, what is the greatest tip you want to give, either on leadership or something else you're passionate about, to anybody who is listening? Because we air this also as a podcast, but also on YouTube. So what would be the most interesting tip you can give the people who hear you speak?
Right. Here's the most interesting one right now. That is to create a not to-do list. Not to-do list. And what I mean by that is the following. What I see many individuals, they have project list, action list, to-do list. This is what we need to do. And that can be overwhelming. Now, what a not to-do list is, those are all the projects, all the initiatives which look good, but are not the highest and best use of your time. And once you start creating a not to-do list, no, I'm not going to do this, I'm not going to do this, not going to do this, I have already made a decision. All of a sudden, decision making, which takes a lot of energy, becomes very easy. And this helps you enormously to continue to focus on the things that matter. Yeah? So my big advice to people listening to this podcast, watching this YouTube, is, if you got lists, your most important list is probably a not to-do list. This is what I'm not going to do, because it's not the highest and best use of your time. It looks good, but it is not the best use of my time. So that would be my advice, my tip.
And it frees up energy and time, etc., to do again.
Absolutely.
To do so.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I loved our talk. Great that we can talk about leadership and share our views on that, Paul. And I thank you very much for your time. And perhaps still soon.
It was a pleasure being here. Thank you.
Me too.